this will be a contribution to the country's educational development. Now, coming to the topic and issue, I have chosen the topic total learning scenario. By actually, I do not mean so much because this is too much for me to gulp. I'm basically in science area, so there are areas other than science, something like fine arts and engineering and medicine and law, etc., which I'm not addressing at all. But in those professional areas, there are more appropriate people to talk about and discuss. I use the word total learning scenario primarily in the sense of school education and undergraduate education. Coming to postgraduate and other education, my address is a little less simply because there are more competent people to talk about. Now, when I say total learning scenario, one has to understand a few things, such as the learning space or the learning universe of India. What is the overall learning space available or currently accessible in India in terms of students, teachers, institutions across the learning age of 6 to 21 or even up to 24 years? Now, one must realize that we, at this point of time, I'm talking about 2023, the learning universe is very large, and I think it is one of the largest, maybe comparable to Chinese, but not comparable to any other countries because we are the second largest country in terms of population. We have currently about 300 million students from age maybe 3 to 21 and even up to 24 years. There is, of course, the number will taper off on either side. Now, this huge number of 300 million is being served by about 10 million teachers. 10 million teachers, so that gives you a ratio of probably 1 to 30, which according to me is still rather high. It should have been much less, around 1 to 15 or 1 to 20 is ideal, but 1 to 30 is okay to start with, it's fine. If we can improve on it, that is reduce the ratio, it will be still better. Then we have about 1.5 lakh, 1.5 million, sorry, that is 1.5 million institutions of various kinds, and this is overall learning space. Now, this learning space is a dynamic one in the sense that some will leave the space and the new others will come into the being, whether it is students or teachers or even the learning institutions. Now, this learning space needs to be addressed and well served, just as the territory of India is protected by the army. Similarly, we need an army of teachers to protect this learning space from any foreign attack or foreign, or even destruction. Okay. Now, in the newer warfare, I'm sure people will realize that even learning spaces or cultural spaces are being invaded, and this invasion has to be appropriately met. Now, here the soldiers are different, the war methods are different, but the process remains pretty much the same. So, I would like to bring to your notice that this is a very large volume of space available, and many people should be entering and engaging themselves into this truthfully. Now, one of the most important issue regarding this is the teacher training. The most important issue that I would like to highlight is teacher training. The current situation of teacher training is not very good. I'm not saying it is very bad either, simply because to the school level, things are not bad. Things are reasonably good. I'm talking about by school level, I mean, say standard 1 and 1 to standard 10 or even standard up to standard 12 or 10 all over the country. Maybe it is comparable to other countries or maybe a little less. But there are higher issues. For example, teacher training below the age of 3 to 6 years, which the new NEP has brought in, we still do not have it. And on the other hand, you do not have proper teacher training in college area, especially in pre-university as well as degree, that is undergraduate areas. We need to improve upon that. So the teacher training situation needs to be addressed in certain areas and need not be, and we can wait in other areas. Overall, teacher training must increase because without this teacher training, it is not possible to fight that, let us call this war on illiteracy or war on ignorance. Okay, if this is a war on ignorance or illiteracy, it is similar to war from the other thing. Then how much is needed in quantity and quality needs to be identified, which according to me has not been done adequately. At the state level, schools are well served, but the below the this that is the what is so called the foundational level training is required again as well as in the college level. The quantity is maybe adequate, but quality certainly needs to be changed. So we need to identify that and take over. Now, whatever I am saying here applies to all the subjects differently, but we in IPT are talking about the physics part of it. Then there are different layers of T1, T2, T3. By that I mean a set of 40, 30 students are being taught by a teacher. We need to create, now I will call this person as a T1. Now this T1 needs to be trained by a set of teachers, T2. Maybe you can go in the ratio of 1 to 100 or something. That is, I need T2 teachers to train the T1 ones in a progressive way. Then these T2 teachers need to be trained by the T3 teachers. So we need a hierarchy of teacher training mechanism. One will not be enough for the large volume that we are dealing with. Currently, already we are in close touch with about 10 million teachers. So obviously, we'll be needing typically about 33,000 T2 and another maybe 5,000 or 10,000 T3 kind of a teacher. So we need to keep this in mind that putting everything on to the T1 or T2 is not sufficient. We need to progressively have different layers of teacher training. Point four is need to build strong cadre assuming depletion due to aging, obsolescence, and technology excess. Notice that the newer technology leaves the people, with difficulty because they cannot immediately adjust. Then there is obsolescence because the learning needs keep changing, and the teacher involved at one age will be aging. So we need to keep this cadre continuously built up. I am suggesting a systematic progressive scheduling in advance spread all over the country. Something like the military does their exercises. Even during peacetime, there are war exercises. These war exercises are meant for keeping the instruments and the ammunition ready all the time, just in case the enemy wants to attack. By the same token, we need a systematic scheduling and progressive scheduling in advance, maybe for 2, 3, or 4 years, so that the at any point of time teacher training does not suffer, and down the line the students do not suffer. The next point is that of the different levels. Now, when I'm talking about teacher training, you need them at preschool level, foundational level, primary level, middle level, higher level, and higher secondary level, and UG and PG as well as research level. So there are 7 or 8 different levels that need to be identified. And that means the work is going to be more broad based and specific. For example, it is very difficult for a PG teacher to teach a middle school teacher or vice versa. Similarly, a UG teacher to go to the primary school and teach. So we need to prepare specific cadres, and that needs to be taken up. Then the teacher training should be like standing army or defense forces. Concept of learning security, if we are talking about food security, information security and all that, why not learning security? Because the learning security, like food security to every person born in India, he should be able to learn at least up to a certain level. A separate ministry of teacher training is needed for a large country like ours and for the large volume of learning happening in this country. It's needed due to the importance and volume involved. Basically, you can talk about a teacher training service command. You can say teacher training service like IAS or PS. I think one Indian education service is already there, but how much it is active, I do not know. But I propose the teacher training service can be mooted as the requirement will only increase and not decrease down the time. My next point is the NEP guidelines. Now, the NEP 2020 has come in quite as a boon, kind of. For some people, it is not a boon, it is a huge burden. But I feel it is definitely a boon because NEP seeks to put us in a modern perspective in a 20th century or in a 21st century perspective, and these guidelines as to how we are supposed to take it forward in an ideal situation and a practical situation needs to be differentiated and addressed fully. There are targets fixed for 2030 and 2040 also, and how much we can make it, how much we can make, we need to ensure. Some of the NEP guidelines are not practical enough, nor can they easily be accommodated in the current situation, like the multiple choices of subjects and the availability of teachers, availability of facilities is not that easy. So a certain amount of movement of the student is necessary. It is very important that students also move. They need not move for general teaching and learning, but they need to move for special teaching or learning. It is important. If you do not do that, then the system does not grow appropriately. The next point I would like to mention is that of intuitive learning and self-directed learning. Why intuitive learning? I mean learning that happens from within. First of all, we need to understand that a human being is somebody who has a body which you and I can see. Then he has a mind. You can see his emotions or her emotions and figure out they have a mind. Then there is an intellect. Then there is a deeper being, and this deeper being is the one which works in intuition. Now, notice that intuition is not rational. There is no rationality involved here. For some reason, I feel that way, and then I tend doing it. Now, the decisions taken by at various levels, whether it's a military level or business level or any level, where some of the or most of the decisions taken are intuitive and they are left to the individual. And he says that I just felt doing like this, or something in my dream came and I did this. So this intuitive learning has to be developed in India. We in India are not very foreign to it, nor the Western world. For example, if you take people like Newton and Galileo and others, if you ask them how did, or even our own Ramanujam, you will come to know that intuitive learning has a huge value, and somewhere we are not in a position to introduce it. So I suggest to this august body that take up intuitive learning or self-directed learning to be given its due importance. It's very, very important. Is teacherless learning evaluation possible? Self-learning to be brought forth as much as possible, which will reduce the load on the teachers. For example, Ekalavya is an example of let us say self-learning. Now he did travel as a driver for Arjuna, but he learned on his own. So neither his guru allowed him to learn or he didn't teach, but he happened to learn by observation alone. That is another way of just looking about and learning, let us say observational learning. And there can be teacherless learning also, where you just focus on a particular thing and what is true there comes out to be the decision that you take. So I would like to mention third thing issue as this intuitive learning. So the first I talked about the teacher training, the focus of this particular talk. Then I went out to NEP guidelines. We have to keep the NEP guidelines in tow because we are working in a system. Then the intuitive learning I have discussed in detail. Then the next and not a less important point is the technological advances. Now, technological advances are not necessarily in our hand all the time. They keep advancing. For example, when the chat GPT came, nobody would really know that it will come so much early in our life. I thought it will take another 10, 20 years, and by that time I may not exist. But then it has come so early. So the technological advances and how to incorporate them in real time or with reasonable delay for exposure or minimal training to the learner is important. Again, a la carte learning. By a la carte, I mean you choose whatever you want to learn and then leave the rest. This is again is some kind of a luxury in a sense that everywhere you may not have the kind of learning available. Then you need to travel a certain distance. For example, if you want to learn very good music, you may have to travel 5 kilometers or 8 kilometers, so something like that. As people used to come to Nalanda from various parts of the world. So use of ChatGPT, Google things, etc. So the technological advances need to be taken into consideration and adjust or tune ourselves appropriately. For that, the we need to be aware all the time as to how technology is evolving and asking us to change our mode of learning. It will be necessary to keep a watch on the growth of technology and how it affects the learning procedures in a dynamic way. For example, already there are complaints that in universities in the United States and other places they would like to ban ChatGPT. But really, I do not know how much the ban will work. It is like trying to ban mobiles in the schools, and to some extent it works, but most of the time, still we will keep using the mobile unless you are very strict about it. So that way, the technological advances is something that you cannot control on, and we have to learn to adjust with it. Now, the chat GPT will have certain advantages. We can take the advantage part of it and work on the disadvantages. Slowly, the chat GPT will also evolve. The other day, I gave a cubic equation to ChatGPT, and it returned the answers to me in precisely 2 seconds. Now, it would have taken me quite some time to solve all the problems. Yeah, and in 2 seconds, getting a cubic equation solved is something that I liked about it. But in some other situation, it gave me some wrong answers as well, wrong or not acceptable to me kind of answers. So slowly, ChatGPT or these devices will improve their performance as the data improves and people address it. But it is necessary to keep a watch on these and how best it can be done. Now, so basically, talking about these few things, I once again reiterate teacher training, an extremely important thing. My 60% emphasis is on the teacher training and its proper improvement. Then come to, of course, NEP guidelines. Then third thing is the intuitive learning. These are the 2 points: teacher training and intuitive learning. These are the take homes as far as I'm concerned. And then they keep a watch on technological advances and incorporation. And lastly, it is observed that the learning seems to go from highly assisted to unassisted or autonomous mode as far as a normal human being is concerned. Now, if a normal, by normal, I mean people are very normal. They don't have any deformities of mind or deformities of body, etc. So the special cases will have to be included in every case. But basically, the progressive development of human propensity to learn. Now, the human propensity to learn is something that exists right from the beginning, whether you take an animal or an insect or anything, because they want to survive. Now, this propensity is to survive, and the issue is not only to survive, but why to survive. I think most of the animals do not ask the question why we are surviving, but the human being and probably little higher animals, they know that there is a purpose of survival also to a certain extent. And when the body doesn't cooperate at all, then of course one peters away. So the progressive development of human propensity to learn needs to be addressed, and the search or find the meaning of life needs to be addressed here. And that is what I have to say as far as this thing is concerned. Now, I